Before we begin, if you're drawn to real, emotional, socially driven stories, take a second to subscribe to Stories Around Us. Because sometimes, it only takes a single moment, a single slap, to expose the truth an entire system has buried for years. Today, you're about to hear a story you won't forget. A story about power, silence, and one woman brave enough to break both. On a gray Monday morning, the courthouse in Savannah, Georgia, stood tall like a relic of Southern justice. Spanish moss draped from the oaks outside, whispering of a history steeped in tradition, but inside those stone walls, something far more explosive was about to ignite. Judge Evelyn Hart, 60 years old, was the first Black woman to serve as Chief Justice in Savannah. Her silver-streaked hair was tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and her sharp gaze had long commanded respect without ever needing to raise her voice. That morning, she stepped into her courtroom without her robe, wanting to personally review a file before the day's docket began. She didn't know it yet, but this moment without the visible symbol of her power would become the match that set fire to an entire corrupt system. Officer Briggs, the arresting officer in a juvenile vandalism case, stood at the prosecution table with arms crossed and a smirk that seemed permanently stitched to his face. He barely noticed Evelyn as she walked in. To him, she was just another clerk or court employee not worth a second glance. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he snapped, storming toward her. And then, without warning, he slapped her across the face, a sharp, open-handed strike that echoed like gunfire in the nearly empty room. Gasps followed. A reporter's pen fell to the floor. Even the courtroom lights seemed to flicker. Evelyn didn't move. Her cheek burned, but her gaze stayed locked on the man who had just assaulted her. He didn't flinch. He had no idea who she was. But that changed when she stepped onto the platform, slipped on her judicial robe, and took her place behind the bench. One strike of the gavel silenced the room and began the unraveling of everything Officer Briggs thought he controlled. "You just struck a sitting judge in open court," she said, her voice like a blade through glass. "And this time, it won't be swept under the rug." From that moment, the foundation of a long-protected empire built on racism, power, and silence began to crack. And Evelyn Hart, once underestimated, now stood at the center of a storm that would take down the very walls built to exclude her. For a moment, no one in the courtroom breathed. Officer Briggs stood frozen, the weight of his mistake only just starting to register. He looked around, expecting someone to laugh, to brush it off, to pretend it didn't happen. But no one did. Instead, the courtroom watched in stunned silence as Judge Evelyn Hart, still composed, still standing, gathered her papers and turned calmly to the bailiff. "Mr. Carlson, please ensure this courtroom's security cameras are recording and backed up externally. We are about to begin a formal statement for the record." Carlson, a seasoned bailiff with 30 years in service, swallowed hard and gave a tight nod. He knew Evelyn Hart. Everyone in the Savannah judicial system did. She didn't bluff. She didn't threaten. She delivered. Briggs's arrogance began to crack. "I didn't know who you were," he muttered, stepping back defensively. Evelyn didn't flinch. "That's not an excuse. That's an admission. You didn't know, so you assumed I didn't matter? And because you thought I didn't matter, you raised your hand." A few reporters in the back had already begun to type furiously. One attorney's phone was discreetly aimed at the judge's bench. The story was no longer just a courtroom scuffle. It was about to become a national headline. "Let the record reflect," Evelyn continued, her voice now amplified. That Officer Nolan Briggs struck a sitting judge without cause or provocation. This is not just a violation of courtroom conduct, it is a criminal assault on a public official. Briggs's face reddened. You're overreacting, he snapped. I was just doing my job. That kid, he's a thug. He had spray paint, and enough. Evelyn thundered, slamming the gavel down once, then twice. You do not get to justify violence by criminalizing a teenager. You do not get to shift blame because you were careless with your power. Not in my courtroom. Not anymore. The courtroom was dead quiet. She turned to her clerk. Ms. Reyes, enter into the record that Officer Briggs will be referred for formal judicial investigation under Georgia state law. Article 16, Section 1. Briggs was beginning to sweat. He glanced at the bailiff. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious, Evelyn replied. Officer Carlson, detain Sergeant Briggs. Do not apply handcuffs yet. He is still a sworn officer, but he will not leave this room without a federal review. Briggs opened his mouth to protest, but Evelyn raised one finger and silenced him. You've had 20 years of looking down on people like me, she said quietly. But today, you're going to look up. And then, with the entire room watching, the empire of silence that had protected men like Nolan Briggs began to crumble one camera flash at a time. News that a police officer had struck a sitting judge in open court spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours, security footage from the courtroom had made its rounds from legal blogs to national news networks, all plastered with the same explosive headline, Savannah cop assaults, judge career crumbles in 4 minutes. Inside her chambers, Judge Evelyn Hart wasn't basking in the media storm. She wasn't looking to punish just one man, she was coming for the entire system that had allowed officers like Nolan Briggs to abuse their power unchecked for years. Carlson, she said to her bailiff, get me someone from Internal Affairs. I want every file on Briggs from the past 10 years open to everything. Carlson gave a quick nod and left the room. Evelyn turned back to her desk and pulled out an old manila folder, filled with handwritten notes, her personal collection of suspicions, doubts, and overlooked details from cases past. For years, she'd known something was off. Now, she was ready to name it. By midday, 2 Internal Affairs agents arrived, Agent Dana Rowe, a no-nonsense black woman known for cleaning up corruption, not covering it up, and Agent Miguel Santos, a sharp-eyed Latino investigator with a reputation for finding trails others missed. They didn't need Evelyn to explain much. Briggs had already been on their radar, but something always kept him from facing consequences: lost evidence, withdrawn complaints, anonymous retractions, convenient, suspicious patterns. Dana opened her laptop and pulled up a closed investigation 2019. Officer Briggs accused of beating a 17-year-old boy during an arrest. Body cam malfunctioned. No video. Case closed due to lack of evidence. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Miguel scrolled to the authorizing officer, Detective Martin Whitaker. Whitaker, Evelyn asked quietly. He trained Briggs, then got promoted to captain. Dana nodded. Retired last year, but the entire command structure under him is still in place. One by one, more reports appeared, each one another buried complaint, each one pointing to a growing web of protection. Prosecutors had ignored evidence, officers had covered for each other, victims' voices had been buried. One name kept surfacing again and again: ADA Carson Ellison, the assistant district attorney, who'd handled many of Briggs's cases. Evelyn remembered the man all too well, smirking, casual, always eager to cut deals, always one step ahead of accountability. "We're not just looking at a violent cop," Evelyn said. "We're looking at a system built to protect him from the police station, to the DA's office, to the courtroom itself." Dana stared at her, steady and firm. "How far are you willing to take this?" Judge Evelyn didn't blink. "All the way. I want a list of every case Briggs ever touched, every complaint that was buried, every prosecutor who looked the other way. And I want it on my desk before sunrise." Miguel raised his eyebrows. "That's going to take all night." Evelyn met his gaze. Her voice was low and resolute. "Then don't stop working. In your opinion, who's the real hidden figure here? Is it Briggs, the brute with a badge, or the system that kept him protected for 20 years? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. By midnight, Evelyn's office was a war room. Files were stacked on every surface case records, sealed complaints, internal memos long thought lost. Dana and Miguel worked in quiet urgency, cross-referencing names, dates, outcomes. The more they dug, the more they found a rotten orchard masquerading as a justice system. But Evelyn knew the real danger wasn't what they were uncovering. It was who was watching them uncover it. At 1:07 a.m., her phone buzzed. No caller ID. She stared at it for a second before answering. No voice, just breathing. Then, "You need to stop." She set the phone down, her hand cold. Dana looked up. Trouble Evelyn handed over the device. Miguel ran a trace, but it was a burner, untraceable. "They're watching," Evelyn said quietly, "and they're scared." An hour later, a package was delivered to her chambers. No return address. Inside, a photo of her 11-year-old nephew walking home from school taken 2 days prior. On the back, written in block letters, "Stay in your lane." Evelyn didn't react. She simply locked the door, picked up her landline, and called her bailiff. "Carter, I need my nephew pulled from school immediately. Quietly. And I want someone I trust watching my sister's house. Now." "Consider it done," Carter said. He didn't ask questions. He knew the look in her eyes. He'd seen it before in veterans, survivors, fighters. The next morning, news broke. Social media was ablaze with fabricated scandals, a viral post falsely accusing Judge Hart of misconduct from 2009. A blurry college photo of her at a peaceful protest, twisted into evidence of radicalism. The hashtags followed fast: activist judge, Hart must resign, biased bench by noon. Evelyn's email inbox had over 300 messages, death threats, racial slurs, demands for resignation, and buried in it all, a single message with no signature: "Back down, or we come for everything." In the halls of the courthouse, eyes had started to shift. Colleagues whispered. Some avoided her altogether. Others offered half-hearted support, as if afraid they'd be next. But Evelyn Hart was not built to break. She called Dana and Miguel into her office and handed over a black binder. Inside, years of personal notes, suspicions, unexplained transfers, whispers she'd documented but never acted on until now. "This is everything I never said aloud," she told them. About Ada Ellison, about Whitaker, about backroom deals I overheard at country club dinners. If they're going to come for me, they better understand I'm not coming alone. Miguel looked through the binder, eyebrows rising. "Judge, this isn't a shield," he said. "It's a bomb." Evelyn closed her eyes and nodded. "Good, because I'm done playing defense." The next morning, Savannah's courthouse was packed to the walls. Journalists, attorneys, law students, and locals crammed into the hallways not to witness an ordinary proceeding, but to watch Judge Evelyn Hart speak publicly for the first time since the courtroom assault that shocked the city. Today, Evelyn wore no judicial robe. She didn't sit behind the bench. She stood like a citizen, a whistleblower, and a woman ready to drag the entire system into the light. At the far end of the courtroom, Assistant District Attorney Carson Ellison sat stiffly beside Elliot Parrish, a state ethics board representative with a gray suit, a tight jaw, and the posture of a man who hadn't blinked since law school. Judge Hart. Parrish began in a flat voice. We've received your request for a public hearing regarding your recusal. I'm here to clarify that and ensure the record is preserved. Evelyn nodded, her voice clear and steady. I've reviewed the motion from the district attorney's office, she said, her gaze sweeping across the room, which argues that I'm too emotionally compromised to continue overseeing the Briggs case because I was assaulted by the defendant. Ellison sat motionless. I understand the statute, which is why I am voluntarily stepping down from the Briggs case, but not because I'm intimidated, not because I've lost perspective. I'm stepping down because I refuse to let this case be quietly buried. She turned toward the reporters, locking eyes with a young black journalist in the front row. I am requesting that the Briggs case be elevated to special review status, and I am formally requesting an independent federal monitor to investigate every case Officer Briggs was involved in, along with his collaborators. A wave of murmurs swept the courtroom. Ellison leaned forward slightly. Judge, I caution you, this isn't the appropriate forum for conspiracy allegations. I'm not alleging. Evelyn replied coldly. I'm presenting evidence. She signaled Dana, who walked forward and placed a binder on the table. Inside, 3 formal complaints, 5 sealed internal memos, 2 body cam footage logs marked as missing, now recovered, and a courtroom transcript from a 2018 juvenile case, all bearing Carson Ellison's signature. In 5 separate cases, Evelyn said, you declined to prosecute Officer Briggs, despite clear evidence of excessive force and conflicting testimony. In each of these cases, black teen defendants were pressured into plea deals often without legal counsel. Ellison paled but remained silent. Dana placed another document in front of the ethics board rep. And here's a wire transfer, she said, voice even. $15,000 from the Savannah Police Benevolent Fund earmarked for scholarships was rerouted into a legal defense fund used for Officer Briggs last year. Parrish stiffened. That may not be relevant to the ethics complaint. It is. Evelyn cut in. If public funds are shielding corrupt officers, it's not just unethical, it's criminal. She turned to Ellison, eyes burning. Tell me, Mr. Ellison, who protected Briggs when the 2019 body cam footage vanished, the one where a minor ended up in the hospital? Ellison opened his mouth, then closed it. Dana spoke instead. We tracked the footage to a private server owned by a security contractor based in Atlanta. That contractor has an active contract with Savannah's mayoral re-election campaign. Evelyn's voice dropped like a hammer. And who approved that contract? Dana didn't answer. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. You did, Evelyn said, her voice steady. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Phones rang. People stood, stunned. And yet, Evelyn stood tall, unmoved. Let the record reflect, she said, that I am stepping away from this case not out of fear, not due to pressure, and not because I intend to be silent. She turned to face the crowd, her voice rising with conviction. Today is not about a slap. It is about what that slap revealed. A system fueled by fear, protected by silence, and loyal not to justice, but to power. At the far end of the courtroom, Carson Ellison hurried out, pale and sweating, his phone ringing off the hook. Evelyn turned back to Dana and Carter, exhaling slowly. We just shook the whole damn building. After the hearing, Judge Evelyn Hart barely had a moment to breathe. By the time she returned to her chambers, her assistant had already laid out 6 voicemails. 3 from the mayor's office, 2 from the ethics board, and 1 from her sister. My sister Evelyn muttered. She saw the hearing on the news, said Carter, her bailiff, standing just inside the door. Said you looked taller. Evelyn allowed herself a brief smile, but the weight hadn't lifted. She sat at her desk, scanning a new folder Dana had delivered updates on Ada Carson Ellison and a redacted name linked to a private security contract. Before she could process it, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. 1 new text message. She opened it. Nice house in Mount Pleasant. Does your nephew still bike home alone from school? Her hand froze. The screen blurred slightly, but the message burned through like acid. She rose from her desk, walked to the door, and locked it. Carter, she said quietly, look at this. He read the message, and his expression darkened. That son of a... Don't say it. Evelyn interrupted. I need a name. I want to know who sent that message. Quietly. Carter nodded. And your nephew, I want him out of school by noon. Safe house. No exceptions. I want eyes on my sister's home 24/7. Carter didn't argue. He just started making calls. That night, Briggs was moved, not released, not officially transferred, just relocated. No paperwork, no announcement. Just escorted quietly through the back corridors of the precinct like contraband. He was handed a burner phone, an unmarked vehicle, and a name. Evelyn Hart. The man from the shadows, the same one who'd visited his holding cell, appeared again. He leaned into the car window and said, "One warning. Clean. Subtle. You don't touch her. You don't even see her. You just make her feel it." Briggs didn't answer. He just stared ahead. "I've been making people feel things my whole life," he muttered. And with that, he vanished into the Savannah night. The next morning, a small package arrived at the courthouse. No return address. Inside, a photo of Evelyn's nephew, taken 2 days ago, walking home from school. On the back, scribbled in jagged black ink, "Stay in your lane." Evelyn stood perfectly still. No gasp, no tears. She picked up the phone and spoke calmly. "Get me the U.S. Marshal's office," because whoever had just knocked on her door was about to learn what it looked like when a judge stopped playing by the rules and started writing new ones. What would you do if your family was threatened for speaking the truth? Would you stay silent or step into the storm like Evelyn did? Drop your thoughts below. Your comment might give someone else the courage to do the same. The federal building in downtown Savannah was a cold fortress, a structure of gray stone, silent corridors, and security that drilled down to the screws. That morning, Judge Evelyn Hart sat across from 3 U.S. Marshals and 2 officials from the Department of Justice DOJ. Open files covered the table, pens were poised, no small talk, no delays. Evelyn slid a photo across the table. "My nephew," she said calmly, "taken 2 days ago without his knowledge." It arrived this morning in an unmarked envelope, with a message. Marshal Mercer, tall and gray-haired with a stony face, examined the picture. "Are you certain this came from Briggs? No?" Evelyn replied. "I'm certain it came from someone protecting him. Briggs doesn't send warnings like that unless someone gives him permission." "What exactly are you asking us for?" asked Francis Kwan, the sharp-eyed DOJ official. Evelyn folded her hands. "I want full protection for my family. I want Briggs in federal custody by the end of today. And I want every case tied to him frozen for independent review. Quan raised an eyebrow. That's going to shake Savannah's courts for months. Evelyn didn't blink. Then let them shake. Within the hour, a U.S. Marshals task force traced Briggs using the burner phone. The call history led them to a shell company in Atlanta, sharing an office with a lobbying firm linked to the Savannah mayor's re-election campaign. Evelyn exhaled sharply when Dana delivered the report. So it's not just the courts. Dana nodded grimly. It's deeper. You said this company was flagged before Evelyn asked? Dana opened her file. First, in a corruption probe 3 years ago buried. Second, 6 weeks ago, in a financial audit request filed by a local journalist. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Name Julia Spence. Silence. She disappeared 2 days later. Dana said, found in her car, ruled an overdose. But she had no history of drug use. Did she know? But she had a history of exposing corrupt officials. Evelyn stood. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was focused like steel sharpened by fire. Find everything she was working on, every file, every source, every note. If there's a thread she was pulling, we're ripping the wall down. Dana hesitated. Judge, this might go far beyond Briggs. Evelyn looked her dead in the eyes. I'm counting on it. Meanwhile, Briggs gripped the steering wheel of a borrowed car, his knuckles bone white. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. His burner phone buzzed over and over again. Orders, threats, instructions, some from handlers, some from old allies now turning their backs. He thought the photo of Evelyn's nephew would rattle her, back her down. Instead, it woke her up. Now he was the one being hunted. He pulled into a half-empty underground parking garage. From the trunk, he retrieved a duffel bag cache, a second burner phone, and an unregistered Glock. He wasn't planning on going down quietly. But before he could reach the stairwell, a voice echoed through the concrete Sergeant Briggs. He turned fast, gun half drawn. 4 U.S. Marshals emerged from the shadows, weapons already raised. Put it down. Briggs froze. There were no lies left to spin. No rescues coming. No deals waiting in the back room. He dropped the bag, then the gun, then sank to his knees, the concrete greeting him like the end of a long, crooked road. 3:14 p.m. The alert flashed on Evelyn Hart's phone. Briggs in federal custody, unarmed, arrested without incident. She didn't smile. There was no triumph, only confirmation. In her chambers, she sat surrounded by files, flanked by Agent Dana Rowe, Bailiff Carter, and now DOJ Representative Francis Quan, who had returned this time with reinforcements and a locked briefcase. We've reopened the Julia Spence file, Quan said. The original autopsy was marked inconclusive. But the coroner's report was altered post-submission. By whom, Evelyn asked? Quan's tone flattened. By a login credential that no longer exists in the system. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Someone's been erasing the truth like it's pencil. Quan nodded. Not anymore. We've assembled a joint task force DOJ, Internal Affairs, and an external judicial review board. Dana added. Briggs isn't talking yet, but he will. Evelyn didn't look up. She was reading names, cases patterns. A map of corruption, charted across the paper like a spiderweb. Carter stepped closer. You did it. Evelyn shook her head. No, she said. I just turned on the light. The roaches scattered themselves, but the roaches weren't done. That evening, Evelyn received a voicemail from an unknown number, a voice she hadn't heard in years, smooth, calm, calculated Clara. He was one of the few who called her by her first name. You've probably seen my name on the list. And you're probably feeling betrayed. But if you burn it all down, remember, you won't just take us. You'll take what little order this city has left. Walk away while you still can, or you'll lose more than your seat. It was Judge Benjamin Halcroft, her old mentor, the man who once swore her in. She stared at the phone after the line went dead. Carter stepped into the room. Was that a threat? No? Evelyn said coldly. That was a warning. Which is worse. That night, it began. The smear campaign. First, a fabricated article accused Evelyn of misconduct in a 2009 case. Then came an old photo from her college days, her fist raised in a peaceful protest, now framed as radical extremism. Next, anonymous tips flooded media outlets, suggesting ties to activist networks. Hashtags trended, "Activist Judge Hart must resign, impartial no more by morning." Her nephew's school received a call from a concerned citizen asking if he was being indoctrinated. They weren't just attacking her name anymore, they were coming for her bloodline. Carter stood in her office doorway that night, arms crossed, face carved in stone. They're trying to discredit everything. I know, Evelyn said. They're going to bury the truth under noise. He nodded. Burn your legacy. Ruin your reputation. She stood, walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small black binder. What's this? He asked. Everything I've never said out loud, she replied. About Halcroft, about Ellison, about sealed cases and backroom whispers at country clubs. You documented it all. I'm a judge. Carter. Documentation is survival. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widened. Evelyn, this isn't a shield. It's a nuke. She looked at him, voice calm. I'm done surviving. I'm making sure they never hide again. 9:30 a.m. The steps outside the Savannah courthouse were already full. Local reporters, national correspondents, legal observers, victims of police brutality, and ordinary citizens stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs that read, "Justice for all" or "Justice for none." We stand with Evelyn inside her chambers. Judge Evelyn Hart stood behind the blinds, watching. She wasn't wearing her robe today. She wasn't presiding. Today, she was a citizen, a fighter, a spark with a matchbook. Briggs has been moved to a secure facility, Dana reported. And he's talking? Evelyn turned. To whom? DOJ agents. He's naming names. How many? She asked. Dana handed her a list. 12 names, 7 police officers, 2 assistant district attorneys, 1 retired captain, 1 city councilman, and 1 name that made Evelyn's heart stop. Judge Benjamin Halcroft, her former mentor. The man who had once called her the future of Savannah law. The man who had sworn her in. Evelyn sat slowly, the weight of the name hitting her harder than she expected. Not anger, grief. No, she whispered. Ben. Carter glanced at the list, his jaw tightening. He swore you in, Dana added gently but firmly. He also approved at least 3 questionable case dismissals involving Briggs. One of them involved a civil rights complaint that disappeared before reaching a hearing. Evelyn clenched her fists. This isn't just dirty cops, she said. This is a poisoned foundation. A network built over generations. Dana nodded. They survived by staying quiet. Evelyn stood tall. Then we make noise. Tenore. The cameras flashed like thunder. The live stream was rolling. Evelyn stepped up to the podium, not behind a bench, not with a gavel, but with truth. I became a judge Because I believed in the promise of justice, she began. But promises mean nothing if they are not kept. She held up a file. This document contains the names of 12 individuals who, over the last decade, colluded to protect one another while abusing their authority. Some are police, some are prosecutors, one is a sitting judge. Gasps echoed. Microphones snapped on. I have submitted this list to federal investigators, she said. I am not reading their names today, not because I fear backlash, but because I believe in due process, the very thing they denied to others. She looked out across the sea of faces. We are not here because of a slap. We are here because that slap exposed a system, one built on fear, silence, and loyalty to power over truth. From the crowd, someone shouted, "We believe you, Judge Hart." Applause erupted, first scattered, then rising. Carter stood behind her, expression stoic but proud. Dana hovered at the edge of the stage, eyes scanning rooftops like a quiet sentry. Because Evelyn had just declared war on the machine, and in doing so, she had painted a target on her back. 3 weeks later, the federal courthouse in downtown Savannah was standing room only. Cameras lined the marble halls. Protesters and supporters packed the plaza. U.S. Marshals surrounded the building like sentinels guarding a revolution. Inside, the air was electric, not just with tension, but with history. Judge Evelyn Hart wasn't presiding. She was a witness, a citizen. A voice the system had tried to silence. The charges: assault of a federal judge, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to suppress evidence, witness intimidation, perjury, 5 felonies. But Nolan Briggs wasn't the only one under fire. Behind the scenes, indictments had already been unsealed. ADA Carson Ellison resigned in disgrace. Judge Benjamin Halcroft was suspended, pending judicial investigation. 2 police captains were terminated. 3 officers flipped and turned state's evidence, and the shadowy handler who approached Briggs vanished. The web had begun to unravel. And Evelyn, she lit the match. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the state calls Judge Evelyn Hart to the stand. The courtroom held its breath as she walked forward. She took her oath, sat tall. Judge Hart, the prosecutor asked, what happened on the morning of April 11th? Evelyn's voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It resonated. I was struck in the face by a man who believed I didn't belong. And what did that moment mean to you? She paused. It meant that the system I had dedicated my life to could no longer protect the very people who serve it. That respect, truth, and law had become conditional, available only to those who fit a certain mold. She looked at the jury not with anger, but with clarity. But it also meant something else, that silence could no longer be our strategy. That if I didn't stand, others would stay down. The defense attorney rose young, anxious, outmatched. Judge Hart, do you think you're above the law? Evelyn tilted her head. No, I think I'm beneath it, like everyone else. That's the point. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The judge banged the gavel once. Do you admit you brought personal bias into this process? I brought truth, she replied. And if truth makes people uncomfortable, that's not bias. That's justice doing its job. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty, on all counts. But by then, Briggs wasn't the story anymore. A statewide judicial inquiry was underway. Over 140 convictions were being re-examined. The Charleston Police Department was placed under federal oversight. The governor called for bipartisan justice reform. A week later, Evelyn returned to the same courtroom where it had all begun. The echo of that slap still lingered, not in sound, but in legacy. Carter stepped in, coat still damp from rain. They want to name the judicial conference room after you? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. I'm not dead. Exactly, he said. That's why it's weird. She smiled, but then turned serious. Will the reforms stick? Carter shrugged. Some will. Others will take time. She nodded. That's the truth about justice. It's not a moment. It's erosion and rebuilding. He hesitated. You sure you want to do this? Evelyn looked him in the eye. I have to. That afternoon, Evelyn stood before the State Judiciary Review Board. Cameras rolled. Microphones hummed. The room fell silent as she spoke. I am submitting my resignation. Gasps. Murmurs. I believe in the law. I believe in its ability to punish, to protect, and to heal. But I also believe that change must be built by new hands. I lit a fire. It is not for me to stand in its glow. A board member rose. Judge Hart. You've inspired a movement. You could lead it. Evelyn smiled, a little sad. Change doesn't need a monument. It needs momentum. She turned to leave, but paused. And make sure the next woman who wears this robe doesn't have to fight to be heard. 2 months later, Evelyn sat on the porch of her family home in Mount Pleasant. The quiet was no longer suffocating. Her nephew biked up the driveway, dropped his backpack, and ran into her arms. Aunt Evelyn, he said breathless. I saw you on the news. You made them listen. She hugged him tightly. I made them look, she whispered. Listening is up to them. They sat in silence as the sun began to set. A warm breeze stirred the trees. The city was still out there buzzing, loud, flawed. But here, for a moment, there was peace. If you're still here, thank you for staying through a story that wasn't easy to hear. Because this isn't just about a slap. Not just a courtroom. It's about the courage to say enough, even when the entire system stands against you. Judge Evelyn Hart wasn't perfect, but she chose to do what was right when the cost was her career, her safety, and her name. If this story moved you, please like this video. Share it with someone who might need the courage to stand up. And subscribe to never miss the rawest, realest, and most powerful stories right here on Stories Around Us. Because sometimes, to shake an entire system, all it takes is one person willing to strike the first match.